morning and welcome to your Daily Game Face. I am Dr. Kim Lannon here with you this morning with Lou.
Stop snapping at me.
Snapping at you. I haven't even spoken to you this morning.
I hear nothing. I heard that.
When did I snap at you? I haven't even spoken to you.
Did you just say I heard nothing? I hear nothing?
Oh, I said I hear nothing because I couldn't hear anything. That was snapping. You a sensitive man.
Sometimes, yes.
Wow. I really didn't snap. I just
Called
said
trauma.
Well, guess what? We're talking about that today. I wasn't snapping at you. I was saying my monitor, I couldn't hear anything, and my monitor was really high. It still really is high. That's me saying, do your job.
No, it's starting the show. There's some buttons to push and stuff.
Well, yeah, you're pushing buttons, all right.
It takes a second.
Yes, it does. Good morning. I'm not snapping at you, you wild and crazy person. I literally couldn't hear anything in my monitor.
Yeah.
You had no music. And you were very loud.
So we were going live. It took a second
I know.
to wait for it to go live.
I know. And it's so lovely. Anyway, what's today? June what?
It's June 4th.
Is it really? God.
Yeah, I know.
June 4th. Where did it go?
I know. It's just flown by.
I know. And we finally had a nice day yesterday. And it's right back to cold today. Did you see that?
Isn't it supposed to be 83 today?
Yeah,
or tomorrow or something?
It's supposed to be 90 tomorrow. Today was supposed to be 80 something, but there's no way it's getting there. Yesterday was 85.
So we get 2 days of spring and then right into summer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, over the weekend, it's supposed to be really nice and then it goes back down again. But this is, it's the challenge of living in New England, right? So It's one of those things. So here we are in the growth month of June.
Now the growth month?
Well, the whole year is the year of me.
Yes.
Which is the year of you. Mm-hmm. And so June is you, but here's where we're starting with for June. Someone's coming into where is it, Kevin?
It's Kevin.
It's Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Good morning. Everyone, it's Kevin. Kevin's coming in.
Kevin's just doing his job.
But the month of June is going to be the growth month for other things because, May was in a different way, but we're having a different month. But the first thing is the month of June has all these different, it's the monthly awareness thing of fill in the blank. But June is the month of PTSD awareness.
Really?
Yes. Did you know that? And it's also for Alzheimer's awareness.
Oh.
And it's also for men's health awareness.
Okay.
And it's got about 20 other things. It's also workers and employee month or something.
It's a busy month.
It is. But in terms of mental health and good mental health, it is those top 3 things that I just pointed out. There's other things too, but I picked those out as, hey, there's people out there that have these things and they're important. But my focus today was going to be on the fact that people who have trauma have a hard time with growth. Yeah. And so and a lot of people have trauma that don't realize that they have trauma because they negate that they have trauma because they don't think they compare. So one of the big things is if we take the big trauma things that we would consider that most people give credit to is, natural disasters, people getting shot at war or having imminent death and danger,
right? Sexual
abuse and trauma, that kind of thing. Those are things that people assume and consume as trauma, but that's not all that counts as trauma. And so my contention, being in the field for almost essentially 30 years, is that everybody comes to the table with some sort of trauma. And what I find is that people will extremely downplay their emotional traumas, and that if it's not something physical and tangible that you can see and report on, then it's not trauma. Kind of like when the court system says we can visibly see when a child's physically abused, but when it's emotional abuse, we can't really tell. It's this gray area, and it's yeah, you can absolutely tell, and that counts. But I point that out because people put that into such a different bucket of accountability. And I'm not saying accountability, I'm saying it's countable, that it doesn't count because it's not that big of a deal, or you can't see it, or it's not that bad. And emotional abuse and emotional trauma is actually just most common in most people. I mean, it just happens. There's not anybody I know that hasn't been able to bypass being emotionally traumatized in some way. Now, does that mean you have PTSD from it? No, but that doesn't mean that you haven't had it. And Could it lead to that? Yes. And go ahead. You're getting ready to ask me something. So go ahead.
No, people tend to associate trauma with a quote unquote traumatic event where we're talking, I'm guessing you're talking chronic trauma, which isn't a specific event. It's a string of pressures.
It could be a string of pressures on you. It could be an accumulation of words and verbal phrases used or narrative used on you growing up, and it doesn't have to happen just when you're growing up. It could happen in your adulthood. You might not have had it growing up, but you might have all of a sudden had something happen in your adulthood, maybe in your workspace, or maybe in a relationship or a friendship. Any of those things would count. But going back to what you were saying about like it's that chronicity at times, but also it can be one event. It can be one moment of someone saying something to you, or one moment of something happening. And that could be enough to create a post-traumatic stress environment for you. We have gotten away more and more. Some people still use it and I interchange it, but we've gotten more and more away from using PTSD disorder, the D standing for disorder, and more of like, it's a syndrome. It's a symptom. It's a post-traumatic stress symptoms, post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTS, just regular, like people have post-trauma stress. That doesn't mean it's full blown all the time, but people who they walk around in like a trauma state all the time, which means your alarm signal is on. It means your anxiety alarm signal is on. And I think that I've seen so many more people, and I don't call it out and label it like that with clients. I just know it in my head and just utilize strategies and techniques and interventions that are around that. Sometimes I'll call it out like that because people really want to know and they're struggling with, they need the label for it.
Yeah.
But I try to just say, like, we're walking around with a lot of like heavy baggage or luggage on us, and we have to let it go, and letting it go doesn't mean forgetting. It's about being able to walk through it, and be able to change perspective on it and do other things around it. But again, it's about the fact that people don't acknowledge that they have it because they do this comparison point to, well, I wasn't at war. Right. I didn't see anyone die. Or if I was at war, I didn't have that happen to me. So mine isn't as bad as so if we're just doing that, even people like I have veterans or people who are still active duty military who will tell me that they've seen things, but it doesn't count as much as this other person's, even though they're having the exact symptoms that are trauma symptoms, but they negate it because they feel guilty or they feel like they shouldn't count it, or it's not as bad as anybody else's, so I shouldn't feel that. But yet they're sitting in it and feeling really stressed about it. And how do you actually grow through that? So in honor of June's post-traumatic stress disorder month awareness, it's about being able to know, do you have trauma? And I'm a big fan, as you know, of don't sit in your shit. Try to move it forward. How do you move it forward? Doesn't mean it's not going to be there. You can't make it you can't undo it.
Right.
And that's one of the things that, I learned years ago when I was working in the field with this is, people just struggle so hard by trying constantly to undo, go back and undo, hope to undo. They sit in guilt, they sit in shame, they sit in things that happen. They accuse themselves of being the cause of their trauma, depending on what it is. Or
plus, none of this is linear, right?
Right.
People tend to think you just get better and better and better. Well, there are days you struggle. There are times that you struggle. There are things that trigger you. So
well, and that's the thing is when you're doing disability or people that are on. I just had someone she's going out on family medical leave, right? Because she's struggling with her trauma and she's getting kickback from the disability board, of course, because they're trying to qualify and quantify the fact that is it intermittent? Is it going to be temporary? Again and again, I always write post-traumatic syndrome is forever. Yeah. It's today might be a great day, but tomorrow might not be. And next week might be a whole great week. And then you might have 2 weeks of terrible because of whatever happens. And so there is no partial. Yeah. It's a constant, it's a journey. It can be managed. It can be, healthified. There's my wicked word,
healthified.
Because in Wicked, they change all the words around to confusified. And so it can be healthified. It can be managed and have it not be as impactful on a person. So it can give it a compartment. It can be put to the side. You can be able to have, knowledge of triggers and what to do with them and all those things. But the very first thing, as with everything I talk about, is you have to be aware and acknowledge that you actually have it. And when you do that, not feel guilty that you are being aware and have it, because God forbid, it's okay to have that. But people feel so bad and ashamed of saying, but I don't have, it's not like this other person. If you're going through grief, for instance, like someone had, like I have a client that had her husband pass away, and she saw me in the grocery store. Remember we were talking about the grocery store? Everything happens in the grocery store. Right. She saw me in the grocery store the other day, and we had essentially a full session. She's not my client, but she says, I'll send you the money for, I said, no, we're good. But she was like, we were talking about the fact that she's grieving and she felt guilty about grieving. Right. And it's only been 4 months. And I said, you're grieving. You've got to grieve a year, 2 years. I said, if we get past 2 or 3 years and, she and I keep in contact, I said, and you're really struggling like you are today, then that becomes complex or complicated grieving. And then it becomes potentially traumatic. Right. But right now I'm like, it was traumatic. She had him at home. He died in front of her. She watched the whole process. That's traumatic. Now, on the scale of like watching someone die in front of you on a battlefield. Yeah. Okay. Intensity level may be different in terms of context, but the end result is still the same. Right. And so whether or not you have one or the other, they still count for you. It doesn't matter that you, Lou, might have had one and I had the other. It's still the fact that we have it. Yeah. We have to acknowledge we have it. And then how do you then grow through it? So it's through acknowledgement and acceptance that we have that, and we've, that we have the ability to be like, okay, let me understand this and how it is. So for instance, I'll use a personal example. And it's amazing because there's been, I'll go through the story, but as you know, I survived. I wasn't standing on the blast site of the Boston Marathon bombing, right? But I was 85 to 87 feet away to the left of the first bomb that killed Martin Richard, right? So I'm the trauma experience, that was traumatic. It's traumatic because how many ways could I explain how it was traumatic? I've got all the signs and symptoms when it first happened for like about 6 months afterwards of trauma and post-trauma stress, right? And occasionally I'll have moments of, if there's an environmental trigger that it looks like it, smells like it, gives me a whiff of it in terms of any kind of thing that could possibly be it, a sound, a smell, a person talking about something, it will come back in my mind. My body will dysregulate a little bit, and then whatever. That's normal. And I have no problem talking about that because it's normal, but people feel so guilty. And I have gotten feedback from people like, well, yeah, but you weren't killed or you didn't lose a leg, so it doesn't count.
Right. Yeah. Stupid.
Yeah, it does, because there were so many people around that bomb, ground zero bomb that went off that were impacted in the same way I was. And yeah, I didn't lose my leg and I didn't lose my life, thank God. But I'm forever now in a perpetual context of having that in my head, and it's what I do with it. So I know
you put in a situation of vulnerability that few of us experience.
Exactly.
Plus, especially when the second bomb went off, all of a sudden you don't know how many more there are.
And that exactly went right. Exactly. Yeah. And there's so many things about that. So,
so that's extreme vulnerability, which is a traumatic event. That's
it's a traumatic event, and it's an imminent death potential, right? And these are criteria that you have to meet to have the diagnostic on it. But regardless of that, it's your perception and interpretation of what it means to you, and then what you do with it. Now, I have clients that I see from that experience that come to me for that experience the same thing, didn't have a limb loss, didn't obviously lose their life. One person did have connection with someone that died in it. Yeah. But people don't realize how many people were impacted by that, because people who have post-traumatic stress from it and the symptoms of a loud sound that sounds like a bomb going off, like that's what happens with me. Or when, everyone squelches it and goes quiet because we don't count. It's not that, right? And it's like, how do you grow without talking about it? So I'm very free and open. I don't care if someone says, well, that's not trauma. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It absolutely is. And I have to do it in order to I have to talk about it when I'm like in those moments, if people are around, or I process it with cognitive behavioral techniques myself, so that I don't end up dysregulating and then doing what people would do normally is they get paralyzed, they get frozen, they numb out and, run away from it. It's like, no. So I've had people ask me recently in my class last semester, because we were talking about trauma and dysregulation of, do you get dysregulated when you run the marathon? And very good question, right?
Yeah.
Because I have to pass the site every year,
right?
And I'm down in Boylston.
You have to recreate that moment every year.
So it's interesting because over time, the very first year I ran after the bombing, which was 2 years after it, because the first year it was crazy busy and I was there. I went, but I didn't run. But I stood in the spot. I stood in my normal spot where at the end of at the finish line. Right. So, but the year after is when I ran. The dysregulation was way more present because it was my first time coming down Boylston to run past that spot.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of me like stopping like in front of they did a memorial, right? And there's a picture from the professional photographers where I stopped. I don't really remember doing that.
Yeah.
Like it was a moment of like that moment. And so, but as soon as I turned down Boylston, so if people don't know it's the famous turn, like, down Boylston, left on Boylston, right on Hereford, left on Boylston. When you come down Boylston Street, there's two spots. Now the first bomb spot, the second bomb spot is the first one you hit in terms of running. I don't have as much connection, so I don't get as emotional in that spot, even though I know what has happened right there. But the one that I get to is right before the finish line, which is where I was. That one has emotional content for me.
Yeah.
And so I don't get dysregulated, but I get a feeling. And so every single year there's always tears. It's not like a hard cry. It's that immediate, the pass over of that, to feel that. And that's normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. And people are like, why do you get so emotional? Well, first of all, because of the Boston Marathon. Second of all, because it's emotional in that environment to pass that spot, to have that feeling. And also do you have a lot of intuition and intuitive empathy? I do. So therefore, probably impacts me a lot harder than some other people. Do I have resiliency around like not falling apart and becoming a polyvagal dysregulated mess and totally like having a panic attack? Yeah, I don't have that. And I don't have that anymore. Like when I'm in Boston, the first couple of years they have marksmen and snipers everywhere in Boston and on the day of the marathon. And this year it was upped. I used to be very hyper vigilant watching. I don't do that anymore. But I know that they're there. I'm very aware. And then this year I was super aware for a variety of reasons that I won't go into on air just because it's not relevant. It is relevant, but not. But I was very aware this year, but not dysregulated aware. Yeah. Why is that? Because I have awareness, acknowledgement, and I've done growth over the time to be like, I still want to live my life and not have it be impacted by this and not give it power. So therefore I still push through. And people are always like, how do you do that? Why would you still run the marathon? Why do you?
You've done the work on it. You have perspective.
Right. Because you have to do so acknowledgement and awareness when you have trauma. Now I'm giving a specific event that's the one that like, that's what anyone would associate as traumatic, right? Because that's a physical event. So I'll go to the other ones that we can count because they all count. But as an example, that when you have awareness and acknowledgement, then you can do the things like self-care. And there's where the growth comes from, is once you know that it's what it is, and you know what triggers you, and you know what you don't avoid, people avoid, they would not go down to the site. I mean, we went back down almost immediately because I was like, I need to go back down. It's like you fall off the horse, you got to get back on, so you're not afraid of it. And there's a trauma moment in that too, in a different way, because when I went back down after, and probably people can relate to this because, like I've had Vietnam vets that have gone back to Vietnam years later. And it's that similar, it's a settling thing. But there was, if you remember, and if people don't remember, there was that whole week of after Boston was on lockdown essentially. Yeah. And it was like deafeningly silent. If you remember, like it was, everything was closed down, and it was, you could still go, but it was like, nothing was open because it was a manhunt for the two. but it was so that silence, that deafening silence, and that sticks with me. So I have the event, and then I have the deafening
That
silence.
just amplifies the original trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't make it worse. It just, it needed to happen for me to make
it was processing for you.
Yes, it was processing.
Yeah.
And people run from that stuff. People, don't go
Yeah.
back to, and I don't recommend that for some of the traumas people do. Like, you don't go back to certain things. Like, if you're sexually abused, you don't go back to your abuser's house. Right. I mean, there's
fair enough.
right.
Yep.
Things like that. But in this case, where those things happen, there's a way to have self-care around it. And so there's a big event that's obviously tangible. Now, everyday people that don't have an event like that happen, right? It's those emotional traumas. It's the feeling the less than, the inadequacies, the things of people being in your life that have made you feel fractured. And I've talked about being fractured before. Those are emotional traumas. Now, do you have PTS from that? Maybe.
Let me give you one.
Depends.
And it's
Yes.
a small scale, and I won't
Yep.
put it. I hate to call it trauma because it seems trivial, which is
And
part
you're
of the
doing
syndrome.
exactly what you're
Yeah.
doing my point.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay.
I had this in my first marriage. I came to realize that I couldn't let somebody else vacuum in the house.
Oh, you've told me this before.
I've told you this story.
Yes. Yes.
Because my mother used to get going on Saturday morning, and she would just go off. My father would leave the house, right? And she'd just start cleaning, and she would go off. There was just all this anger and stuff like that. And to this day, I hear a vacuum going, and I'm aware of it now because I know where it came from.
Right.
But my ex-wife was looking at me, why won't you let me vacuum? Because I had to go do it, right?
Right.
Because I was just trying to save myself, thinking she was going to get angry like my mother did.
Right.
You know?
Right. So you have associative trauma.
Right. Yeah.
So that is a traumatic experience that you have learned to associate, like Pavlov's dogs.
Exactly.
Nice stimulus response, right?
Yeah.
And so then it's, instead of it, you're getting rewarded with a lovely steak, you're getting rewarded with like sweating palms and like fear. But that is actually a perfect example of an event that accumulated from your childhood or over time with your mother doing that, and now you associate that in and go, oh, this is bad, because your alarm signal comes up.
Yeah.
It's not the vacuuming, it's the whole picture of the anger and the possibility of a problem coming.
I'm not doing enough to help.
And that implies that you're not good enough.
Yep.
And you should be ashamed of yourself, and you're a failure. Like, it has a lot of implications in the seat of your soul, at the core of the message it's sending, whether she intended to or not. It had that. And so therefore you sit with that.
Yeah, she was just being her. She wasn't aiming at me.
Right. But your childhood and your children interpret things and integrate them in to always personally.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
She was just being her.
Right. And and you've done the work now to know that she was just being her. But in your childhood and growing up years, children just automatically integrate that it has to do with them. And when parents hear that, and I'll say that to them all the time, like, because they'll say, I didn't have the intention to do that. It doesn't matter that you had the intention to do that. The fact is you have to be mindful that children by nature integrate in and assume that it's them, that they did something, that they're doing something, that they're not doing something right.
Right.
Like what I did do, what I didn't do, what I'm supposed to do, what I was required to do, what they thought, like, that's what they do. And so now you go into adulthood, and if you didn't do the work, you would be like a lot of people I see that come in and just be like, it's so traumatizing. It's so trivial, but it's not. It's actually because you're your own entity. So whatever your personal experience is, to have that, you have to know that, okay, it'd be terrible for you to turn around and every time your partner turns on the vacuum cleaner, you get angry at her or you lash out at her or something like that. That would be, and that's what people do.
No, I'm taking the clippers out to defuse the bomb at that point. As soon as I hear the vacuum cleaner or some cleaning going on, I got to figure a way to stop what's coming.
Right. And so, but if you do the work, you know that nothing's coming. I mean, essentially nothing's coming.
Right.
So that would be the work would be to get you to go, okay, there's nothing coming because, Janet's not going to, beat you with the vacuum cleaner or you're not going to be in trouble.
Well,
right. I mean, well, that's true. Well, I hope Janet's not listening, because now she's going to be yelling at you being like, what do you mean you never know? But so I think it's important to realize that your trauma or your experience of something stressful can turn into something more, and you have to address it in order to grow. You have to know where things come from. I mean, I've had
But you get so
revelations.
far with just awareness. Just me figuring that out
Yes.
helps
Well,
you
that's
get
why
around
it's the
it.
first thing is
Yeah.
people are like, okay, I'm aware of it. No, you have to come to a deeper level of understanding. Like it's not that a surface level is vacuum cleaners trigger me.
Yeah.
That's not deep enough to have that's not awareness enough. That's a superficial awareness to not go and have any growth out of, because what does that mean?
Yeah.
That's like a car driving by and having a backfire that triggers me. If you don't go further to what it triggers in you, then yeah, it's not going to get you anywhere. So it's acknowledgement that's at a deeper level, and that's scary for people. And that's why therapists are good, or going to groups, or watching YouTube videos, or reading something on vicarious trauma, having trauma through other people, or your own trauma through your family life, or epigenerational passing, like genetic passing of trauma that happens. Like there's so many pieces there that have depth understanding that you don't realize. I mean,
But it's funny how easy it can be. She asked me the question, why won't you let me vacuum? And I started processing.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of my mother. And it's like in my head, I went, oh,
mm-hmm.
And it's just, again, just talking about it and being aware of it is processing it. And you get to the point, I mean, again, it's a trivial thing. It's not,
but it's see, you're doing it again.
Yeah.
You're doing it again.
No, it is.
Because it's not trivial. It's your experience, and it becomes a problem for you, and it's anxiety provoking for you. If it's something that gives you anxiety, it matters, and it's not trivial. It's important. And that goes back to things like attachment and abandonment issues. Attachment issues, people use those words all the time. You have attachment issues. You have abandonment issues. Attachments are the foundation of how we become who we are and interact in the world in relation to the world and others. If we have fractures in those attachments to people, those potentially can be trauma fractures. Mm. They are traumatizing when we are not securely attached, or we feel lonely, or we feel not taken care of and neglected. And then those are traumas, and people don't realize that. And then, or abandonment issues, people, that doesn't mean people walked out on you. It could, that's definitely a trauma, but it's also like you have abandonment by the fact that people were like maybe keeping you at a distance, and like, don't touch me, don't hug me. Parents don't say, I love you. That's an abandonment feeling. Yeah. And that makes your core of who you are feel worthless at times, less than, insecure, inferiority, not worthy of love or affection from anyone. Therefore, you look for love in all the wrong places. Yeah. Like people don't realize that those are traumatic experiences that even one, but usually those aren't one. Those are usually like a constant, right? Yeah. That continue to go, that set a stage for someone to have an emotional experience where they say it's trivial, it's not a big deal. Like, so what that, they didn't say I was loved or whatever. Or, I have a client that just had a realization recently, and it was such a great aha moment for me as a clinician, but also for them, that they are very triggered in their relationship by the fact that, and legitimately triggered, again, another word that gets overused, but legitimately activated, let's say, by the fact that their partner gets very aggressive and very much up in their face and yelling and screaming and doing these things. And my client, I said, because there's she gets very extremely reactive inside, and then she becomes defensive, and she's very defensive because she feels like she's going to get attacked. Yep. And finally we got to a point where it's like, what in your life history, right, has ever, it's always been nothing's ever, it's just this relationship. Come to find out, there's a very activating event that when she was little, she remembers very specifically, that I think she says she was around 2.5, 3, which would be accurate as one of her first memories. Because I always ask clients, what's one of your first memories? And we've had a couple different ones. And then in talking about this, we finally got to something huge. And she said that she went back and she thought about, her reactions. And all of a sudden she said it was like a snap in her head, that she remembers her mother and her sitting on her couch. And I mean, I asked her, did you talk to your mother about this? Have you talked to your parents about this? She's like, nope, I haven't talked to anyone about this. And she's had nobody else around. And so she said, no one else knew about this. She said, I was sitting on the couch with my mother. It was in the evening. She goes, it could have been late at night because my parents had a thing about staying up late at night and whatever, and they would fight.
Yeah.
And so her memories are involved with fighting and chaos around her. And then she said that her father very crazily, I'm using her word, crazily, came out of the bedroom and came rushing up on them and had a shotgun in his hands, and had it, as she said, as a child, she goes, she knew it was a dangerous thing. She knew it was a gun, like, 3 years old, whatever. And he was blank in his stare. She says she can vividly remember this blank stare, but he was laughing.
Wow.
And she said that trigger, she says, now I know why I'm so activated by this other situation, because it feels out of control. It feels like my childhood. It's very traumatic, but she didn't have the memory brought to that space until we had been talking a lot about, go back, what are your memories? Like, everything was always like after that, but then all of a sudden she's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I remember this. And
you see that level of, I'll use the word crazy. I understand how it feels in this context, but that level of disassociation and just detachment from convention.
Right. And
he had just lost it.
And he had, And I said, do you remember him
That's
saying
scary
anything?
When you see it in anybody.
Right. And so, and it brings up a reaction even in my body when I'm talking about it, and for her, just in that, because you're not human if you don't, but just that she doesn't remember him speaking. She says maybe he spoke. She said, but it was the laughing, and she said it was maniacal and devious, like he had control, that he could hurt my, the client and the mother and the house or whatever it was. And so my client was like, he could hurt me, he could hurt her, and it was clear. And so there's a fear there, and that's been ingrained in the brain to stick. And so now we've been working on that, because now that's the depth awareness and acknowledgement of how do you not then have the response in the moments when you're in the relationship you're in now to disengage, to not feel the fear unless there is an actual fear. So we've established that there's not a danger, but it's just the way that this other person interacts, and that's how they are. But now she's getting better at just being like, I'm not going to engage this. I'm not going to get involved with it. I'm not going to do that so I don't dysregulate myself. Yeah. And so it's been beneficial. It's a struggle though, because she wants it to stop for herself. She wants to just be like, whatever. But I told her, I don't think that it's just going to stop. You can manage it, but through self-care of like making sure that you're doing things for yourself around making sure journal, write your events down. Now, I'm not a big journaler myself. It's a block thing for me, but I do encourage other people, because some people love journaling. So I think it's a great tool. I'm much more now of like, if I have people that don't like to journal, doing voice messaging to yourself, giving yourself a long, giving yourself the detailed experience for yourself on a note on like your voice recorder for yourself, because that's like journaling. It gets it out and that gets it processed. Doing something like that. That's self-care, because people often say, well, how do I self-care around something like that? I'm like, this is what you do.
I think you can do that, not verbally to yourself, but internally to yourself.
You can.
Yeah.
And some people do, and some people can get relief from that, but some people really get it out, need to.
Anything
to get
that
it out.
Takes your thoughts and puts them into words, whether they be inside your own head, that's processing.
Right.
That's forcing is the wrong word. That's compelling you to put shape to what it is you're feeling.
Well, right. Well, it's also like I think, remember Michelle and I have talked, Michelle Michelizzi who's been on, we talk about bearing witness to things. Mm-hmm. When you can bear witness to your own experience and give it legitimacy and give yourself the grace to know that it was legitimate, and which is what I've incurred with my client, with her, to say like, this is because she's always like, but did it really happen? because I think my parents would negate it. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether, and she doesn't want to talk to them about it. So,
No, you don't have to.
and I'm like, you don't have to talk to them about it. And I said, the likelihood in human nature is that was one moment in time so long ago. I mean, this is like a long time ago. They're not going to remember that. And if they do, I'd be surprised because, they might look at you and say, that never happened, that you were crazy. So, you have a very specific memory of it. Just go with your memory of it and let's try to work through it. So we've written in session about it, which is self-care. She has journaled about it. She's written a letter to both parents about it, not to give to them, but to read in the session. We've done like good stuff around that. So I think it's given her
just converting emotion to words.
And that's such an important growth piece, is being able to do that, because it's a resolve that she can never get from them, because she won't. I mean, I don't think she'd probably have a problem with her mother, because I would imagine if her mother had the experience and remembers it, then she'd get but she's not going to get that from the father. I mean, who's going to admit to that? Right. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but maybe he would, but I doubt it. I mean, just knowing human nature. Because then it opens up a whole door of other things that are going on, of shame and blame and everything else. And I said to her, because she's like, should I address this? I'm like, I don't think you need to address this.
She's not responsible for addressing his partner.
Right. And
all she's doing is taking care of her.
Right.
Her dealing with it.
But people often think that they have to do that other thing to come back around to address it, to make it something more legitimate for themselves or real. And I'm like, you don't need that validation. I'm validating you that I believe your experience. I believe that you coming to that knowledge without anybody planting that in your head. You've come to it through your therapy process of going back to try to remember things that would give you a similar feeling or moment when you're in these moments with your significant other, and the fear that comes up. And that's what it is. And it's just addressing that. And it gets to the depth of self-care there, of being able to be like, okay, when I'm fearful of that, now people would ask probably, like, why wouldn't you have her address it with him?
No,
I'm not having her address it with her partner, because I believe,
her partner.
I'm not having her address it with her partner, like explain it to him. Normally I would. Her partner lacks capacity to understand that. So he's a waste of time he's not a waste of time, but talking to him about it is a waste of time, because he doesn't probably care and doesn't see it and won't see it. And
if he did, he wouldn't go to those extremes anyway.
Exactly. So he doesn't really care about what her experience is.
You can just assume people don't deal well with those extremes.
Right. And so for her to tell him, I think would give him more ammunition, and it would fire it up even more. Yeah. So I said, this is something you have to be able to contain for yourself.
This is going to work.
And to be able to work on it yourself. Yeah. And then, and people think self-care, like, go get a massage. This has nothing to do with going to get a massage. We're not massaging this one. This is about really taking care of yourself in the moment, and also self-boundary. I think I've done some of the year of you and me about boundaries, but this is a really good time to be like, okay, half year mark, let's be setting our own inner boundaries. What will I tolerate? What will I accept? What will I allow? What will I
participate in?
Yes. And what will I walk away from that I wouldn't normally before, because I need so bad to get the resolve? And
that's a problem with boundaries. We talk about boundaries all the time, but often people think boundaries involve changing other people, which is something you have to let go of. You can create a boundary that you adhere to regardless of what they do.
Well, and I think so, especially this doing the year of you thing has really spawned a lot of people's conversations and sessions that have been different, that do listen to the show and then come in and talk about it, because I think that whole fretting about the situation of like, okay, what do I do with this? How do I control for it? Do I need to tell people? Do I need to talk about it? Like, it's like all of a sudden it's like this frenetic thing that comes up for people, that they have to do something about it. Like, you don't have to do anything about it. Just
change your relationship with it.
You change your relationship with yourself, going to the boundary by saying, I am going to do for me. I'm going to maybe stay away from this person, or maybe I'm going to not, and that's not avoidance. That's I'm not going to put myself in a space where I know that that is going to be a problem. I'm not going to put myself in an area of my life where I'm going to get this recreated. And if I start that and I get participatory in it, how do I walk myself out of it? How do I walk it back?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm, of course, I'm a very big proponent of talking to someone about it, you know, like a therapist, a coach, a person that's relational, not someone that's not certified, please, not someone that's like out there with their shingle out that has no certification, because these are really bigger issues when you're dealing with traumatic events and you're dealing with traumatic feelings and emotions. That another overused word is set boundaries. People automatically, going to your point, is that it's to change the other person.
Right.
If you have an expectation that you're going to change the other person, you're going to get looped into the trauma cycle of a relationship, right? If we're talking about relationships, you're going to get sucked into that because you are going to keep getting disappointed that you have the hope that they're going to change, and you're going to keep getting dashed and disappointed.
More often than not, it's about, I'm not going to let this have my energy.
Right. And that's hard because
it is hard.
Because we've been socially trained. All of us, it's very hard to escape this. We've all been socially trained that everything that people do impacts us. And it's not to say that, yes, it should impact you, because then you wouldn't be a feeling person. But it's then like, okay, then what do you do with it? How do you do with it? You know, put on your game face.
Yeah.
Put on your game face, because it's how you can get through the day. Fake it till you make it, while you're doing the processing underneath and getting through. And the other big thing, there's so many good things here. You have to have support. If you sit alone in your shit like this, you're going to struggle more, because there's a shame and a blame of self. Like, how did I get myself in this? You know, I don't want people to know. I want, it's a secret. No, just, find, obviously some people you can't trust, but find people that you can talk to. If you don't want to go to a therapist, find a person that's a safe person that can really not judge you, not tell you what to do, can give you advice that's sound, and understand, like, if you can't take it or if you can't move forward on their advice, but they're not going to say, well, you're not doing it, so therefore, like, don't talk to me about it. It's like, well, you can't always move things like that. You just need to find a person that's just a listener, or you need to find someone that gives you good, sound, grounding advice that's not about doing something extreme, just doing something for you. Like, go out. Like, I love it telling people, like, go do your thing for the day. Go do you. Go for your own thing, or do what you need to do for you, and don't worry about the other person, or don't worry about those other things, or that family member that's barking at you for saying no to them for doing something. Right. We get those pressures on us all the time. And when we take our boundary and say, I cannot do it, or that's a lot, that doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you,
no, you have an
ungrateful.
You have an emotional budget.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. You can't spend it all on everything.
Or on one thing.
Yeah.
Right. And every day, because it's exhausting. My nose, here it goes. We have allergies. My nose is starting to itch in here.
It's supposed to be a bad day. Yeah.
Oh, great. Here goes my day. But I love that terminology too, is that having an emotional budget. What are you willing to budget for your growth? Are you willing to expend all of it every day because you're trying so hard to get something to change? Or are you wanting your peace and your harmony for yourself by being like, whatever, as long as it's not like something dangerous or something. Right. It's like, of course, whatever. Like, you cannot change other people. And yeah. And
how many people,
and I'm not always good at this. Nobody's perfect at this. I'm not always good at, I have all the advice, but you have people that like drive you crazy, and you're
Plus
like,
the whole world is so difficult in that regard these days, because you can spend your emotional budget scrolling for 40 minutes in a day if you give into that.
Sometimes that's a wonderful thing. when your emotional budget could be spent doing the other things with people that are driving you crazy, scrolling sometimes is an okay thing.
No, but oftentimes for a lot of people, scrolling is all the crazy people just sucking up your emotional energy.
Except when you have kitties and puppies and rainbows on your scroll. Or recipes, or I have some really interesting TikTok stuff.
Yeah. there's some
that are
good,
fun. That are
yeah,
fun.
that's why I think scrolling gets a bad rap sometimes, because there is stuff that, some of it is escapism and can release you a little bit.
Right. I have
But
great
too many
algorithms.
people-
I have some really
Yeah.
great algorithms. And so
Well, you develop them over time because that's what you gravitate
well, this
towards.
is so as a side, I know we're, and then you go ahead and finish, but I'm laughing because people will come in and tell me about, like, I'm angry about blah. And I'm like, what are you doing to get that algorithm? Because my algorithm is literally like cute cats, following cats, dogs, horses, wonderful happenings. And occasionally I get some other things. Like I follow these couple women that are like sober and have these funny, like they're so hysterical. They have tons of things. And they lead you to other things. Like I love those. And that's pretty much, I mean, occasionally I'll get occasionally, because, I don't do the politic thing. I get occasional posts here and there that are funny and, whatever, but I don't participate in them. I read them, laugh, and I scroll. Sometimes I'll like them, but occasionally, but other than that, I'm like, occasionally I'll post I won't say it. I was going to rat somebody out for taking my phone. Someone took my phone last night and they posted as me on their thing. And I was like, stop writing. It was very funny.
No.
And she's listening. I know she's listening, but I was like, oh my God. It was actually funny. So I allowed it to happen, but she took my
That's
phone.
a cardinal sin.
She took my phone and she was in her own post and she's like using me as me posting. I was like, stop.
Yeah.
On something I wouldn't normally post.
It's like I get so much grief because I'm a sitcom guy, or I'm I like a good Marvel movie or something. It's like, just get out of it for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Exactly. So, but yes. And so that's like a tangible boundary.
Excuse me if I don't want to get into the Diddy trial for 2 hours after I get home from work.
So speaking of trials, okay. So let's talk about traumatizing. Okay. So here.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm deep into the Karen Reed trial, but I won't touch the Diddy trial.
So, okay. So I was asked by 3 clients in the last week that listen, they're like, can you please talk in depth about the Karen Reed trial? And so yesterday, so I'm going to go off a little bit on topic, but it's sort of on topic. So yesterday I was at the New England Patriots, the MVP Meyer Craft Awards. And I was with the Patriots yesterday doing the luncheon that we do every year for the big awards and the big ceremony and everything. And so I'm sitting there and I have a couple clients that are like, they're invested heavily in this, but I'm in it, but they had to, I never hear from them other than like, change the date. I need to reschedule, on occasion, like something like, oh, can you help me with this? Do I need to move Medicaid? Right. But yesterday I had like 3 people being like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what's happening on the Karen Reed. Have you seen it? Because, they listen and I know that we've talked about it. So I was laughing because I was literally texting going, I'm at an event. I can't. So, and I didn't know what was going on, but, so P. Diddy trial, there's something so, it's so grotesque.
It's sinister and grotesque.
There's such disgustingness to some of the stuff I've actually heard, because that has come up in my scrolls, because of entertainment stuff. But I've heard some of the videos of the sexual encounters, and I'm so disgusted that I'm trying to keep away from all of that because it's so gross. And then I'm also I've seen and heard from people, and also on my feeds, like people talking about how he just has done nothing wrong, and then the thought of him being pardoned, it just gets me going. So there's a side.
That's sucking emotional energy,
right? Exactly, so I'm trying to keep that over here because I'm like, oh,
and I can't affect it. I can't. I have no say in this. So why am I spending my energy?
But we don't have any say in Karen Reed either. But nonetheless,
no. But I'm not emotionally.
Oh, you're not.
Yeah,
you are. So
in a villain standpoint, not in a gross, disgusting.
Well, so there's the P. Diddy case has a different psychological flair for me, and for no one's coming in really and talking about the P. Diddy case with me either as a thing that's affecting their life.
The Diddy case, the Middle East, that's gross and disgusting, and there's a lot of things going on that sap my emotional energy. This is just villain. So the Reed trial is just a villain, like a good Marvel movie villain.
Which person are you referring to as the villain?
The Canton police.
The
police in general.
I was going to say, is it Auntie Bev?
The system. The system.
Because Bev yesterday was on a roll.
Oh God.
So to satisfy the asks for the Karen Reed trial, for people that are listening and are still not following the Karen Reed trial, which is national, because it literally is on the morning news every day on national news about the updates.
It's so good. It's so good.
So on some level, I'm trying to keep like an open mind about this. I am a believer. I'm not a juror. I am a believer after watching the first trial, watching all the documentaries on it, watching Karen Read, and now watching and listening to the daily clips and the daily. There's a woman that I do follow who's a defense attorney in the state of Massachusetts that comes on every day a couple times and it does synopsises for everybody to catch them. I'll get you her name. I can't remember right now, but she's in my feed. I'll let you know.
Is she Reddit?
Is she on Reddit?
Is she a redhead?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just wonder if we were watching the same one.
No. And so she comes on and she talks about it. So anyway, so I get all my updates so I don't have to watch the whole thing.
Right.
But yesterday was quite something. So for everybody that didn't watch, it should have been, in my opinion, knowing what I know, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've been around enough, and I'm also watching the trial. That should have been a mistrial yesterday.
Okay, I'm not sure what we're referring to.
So when the DNA evidence was introduced as a backdoor, so the DNA evidence was
I heard about this, but I don't know the details.
So the DNA evidence was not supposed to be brought up, and it was not admitted into evidence. The only time it has been was in the first trial. So the DNA evidence was not brought up, and it was told that it couldn't be brought up by Judge Bev.
Yes.
We'll call it respectfully.
Yes.
And the only way it could be brought up, so it could be on direct and cross, would be that the prosecution for the state would have to be able to introduce it and then build foundation to be able to have it. But Slicky boy, he psychologically made a drop comment into the middle of the blah, blah, blah. And then it got opened and the door got opened, which it shouldn't have been open. And therefore, because it had not been full on presented, the jury now has this thing sitting out there that cannot be struck, that cannot be, remanded. You can't, because now it's like sitting there. Yeah. So, I mean, her team is so good. Alessi is so good, and it came in and said, and made a very good case. And according to the defense attorneys that you can see on the social media loops, are like, this is a mistrial. This should be a mistrial. This, it's so clear that it was a leading thing that was done on purpose to make the jury think that there was something there that now they can't have context to, because no one can build foundation on it. And the judge allowed it. She just, she came back and was like, it's admitted, it's fine. And and this has been a pattern of her being accused of being part of the cover up, the corruption and all this stuff, because she sits there and she's got all these signals going on with people. So yesterday, several moments of different, they had a man come on yesterday that testified that the taillight, when it went into the Sally Port, when he saw it at the crime scene versus later in the day, that they did not look the same.
Yeah.
And that they were, originally it was this little small piece that was missing at the crime scene. And by the time it got to the Sally Port, the entire thing was shattered and gone.
Yeah.
And he was probably the most credible, honest, no stammering, no, Officer Dever, as she made sure she knew her name was not Dever, but Officer Dever. That was brutal to watch, right?
Brutal to watch.
I watched that thing, but her testimony, you could tell she was obviously, she's lying. It was like, you don't have to be a psychologist.
Completely changed.
I mean, and you don't have to be anybody with any special talent to know she's lying. But then you get this guy up on the stand yesterday being like, that is not what it looked like. No, absolutely not. That is not what it was. Yeah. It was a win. It was a huge win for Karen Read again. She's having all these stacked wins. And meantime, there's a very biased judge that's not my opinion solely. It's just what I'm watching and I'm hearing of someone just psychologically maneuvering the jury. And I'm thinking, how is this jury sit? Because, I want to know psychologically, what is this jury thinking about watching this? Because you can't be watching it outside and not be experiencing it inside going, clearly there's something going on here. So
it's certainly reasonable doubt.
well, and that's the thing. You can't, well, you can convict her, but how? There's so much groundwork that's been laid for reasonable doubt. And talk about traumatizing. Going to the theme of trauma today, this is traumatizing for the family, her family,
Yeah.
her, and
how about the general public? Because if this is the capability of the court system,
we're choosing to watch. But yes, the capability, right.
You get yourself in a situation where you end up in court in Massachusetts.
And
is this what it's like?
Right, or anywhere, right,
anywhere.
And yeah. I mean, you could liken it to. I mean, I think it's very traumatic. We've had a lot of ICE raids going on here and it's very traumatizing. And a lot of people in my practice are talking about it because some of them live in the areas where the ICE raids are going on, and they're like posting up videos and then coming in and showing me like this was right next to my house and all this, and it's traumatic. And what a good segue into that, because I forgot about that. The trauma that's going on around people, like people going into the courthouse on their scheduled yearly renewals for their thing and being escorted out. Like they're doing all the right thing. They're documented. They're going in for their yearly and just being taken. They're being taken right out, and their kids are being like, it's insane. It's insane because the trauma that it's creating. And yeah, if you're undocumented, you're illegal here, whatever. Those are all, but we're talking about the traumatic experience as someone who's doing all the right things and then just being swept off a street or swept out of a courtroom when they're there on their own volition, doing all the right things, and they're being taken out. It's a lot of undoing of trying. That's trauma. And it's like, and we don't have any way to control that. So going to your point of like, where are you safe? Where is it safe to be? Like, what is a courtroom going to be safe for you? Is like,
yeah.
So, I mean, I have so many stories in my practice right now of these things going on. I'm like,
stories of vulnerability. It's just making you more vulnerable, and that's where trauma comes from.
And the vulnerability of not having that sense of protection or control that you used to feel or that you think you had, you don't.
Right.
And that's scary for people because that's traumatic in and of itself, because it puts you in a fear alarm state at all times, especially for people that might be more vulnerable. I mean, I have a client that is, I'm going to be mindful here. I have a client who isn't married to her significant other, but he's here from another country overseas, not in North America and South America.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're on a constant daily like worry that where he's working and is a high volume area for being picked. Like he hasn't done anything. There's no reason to pick up, but they're constantly like, he's going to get picked up and be deported for nothing. And so it's a constant worry. And we spent our session yesterday talking about
legal parameters.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But that doesn't matter. And that's the fear is like, it's, well, you're here from there and therefore you're going to be, I mean, people are finding random reasons. You just are existing in the world, like legitimate person standing in the courtroom, renewing their thing from the year, and they're just taken out. No criminal history, nothing going on. They're just being waited for outside and taken.
Yeah.
Trauma. So anyway, now my nose is really itching. So anyway, so let me give you the tips.
Okay.
Even though we went off on a little tangent there with Karen Reed.
Oh, we have to do an episode.
I know. I promised the 3 clients this past week that I would do an episode that was more not just talking about the gossip of it, but I would talk about like the ins and outs psychologically of did Heather put up a laughy face?
Yes, she did.
Oh, that's because she's the one that took my phone, by the way.
Oh, okay. That makes all kinds of sense. That tracks.
Oh, she took my phone.
That's trauma right there.
Yeah. It was funny though. I allowed it because it was fine, but I was like,
hate handing over my phone.
I didn't hand it over. She took it.
Okay.
There was no handing.
Yeah.
I love her.
Worse.
There was no handing over. She just took it. She's like, let me see that. And she wrote for me.
I have a cleaner,
You have a cleaner?
I have a friend who's agreed to just wipe everything. I'm a talk show host.
Oh my God.
You should see my search history.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah. I can imagine
if I die unexpectedly, just wipe everything, please.
Oh God, it's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to ask you that off air. What are you searching? Are you searching for how long does it take someone to die in a snowbank at 2:00 in the
Oh,
morning?
worse than that.
Okay, how to murder someone in a snowbank? How to kill someone without getting not found out? Oh my God. Okay, so in all seriousness, that's over. Now I want to know what's in your search. We're going to do this after the show. But in all seriousness, so a depth dive of awareness and acknowledgement to what you're going through, what you've gone through, if you feel you've got that going on, and then doing techniques like journaling, grounding yourself, doing meditative, living with intention for the day to not give your your emotional or your mental budget too much leeway.
Yep.
And journaling, talking to someone, and then again coming back to good internal boundaries of what you are going to tolerate, accept, let happen, not let happen, and how you're going to manage that so that you don't get maneuvered, triggered, or whatever. And if people don't like that, you have to be able to sit with the uncomfortable. There's part of the trauma response. You have to sit with the uncomfortability of someone being upset with you, which is hard.
Can it be as simple as when you find yourself anxious, ask yourself, why am I anxious?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here?
You can, but a lot of people, you know what the answer is? I don't know.
Well, give it some thought because you do know.
Well, I would say that. I'm like, you actually do know. And they're like, no, I don't. That's a common loop with people. It's like, I don't know.
Well, because they're uncomfortable about digging into what it is
Right.
they're uncomfortable
Well, because
about.
they do know, but they don't want to talk about it because
Right.
they know it's going to go down the path that they already know because they've had enough time in their life to think about it, which is why they're sitting with me now, which is why they're anxious, but they just want me to fix the anxiety
Right.
without talking about it.
Right.
And that's not how this works.
Right.
And people are always like, why do I have to talk about it? I love it when clients will come in and say, I don't want to talk about my childhood because it has nothing to do with what's going on now. I'm like, okay.
Okay, we're done here.
And I'll say, oh, well, okay. And I have some funny anecdotal good stories over the years of people that have done that are still actually with me. And we laugh about it now. Like, remember when you came in and said you had already done that work with another therapist years ago? And I've got some good ones about that that are entertaining in a good way from their point of view. Like they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually said that. But it's because people don't want to work on it.
Yeah.
Because it's scary. It's scary. It's hurtful. It's things that can't be resolved because the expectation is that they can fix them somehow. Like it's
It's
there.
a box they've closed
Right.
and they don't want to open it again.
Right. Right. But it's there. The
It's
problem
a snake
is
in a box.
well, that's the thing is the box is there and it's screaming. It's got the snake in it slithering. Yeah. It's got the bear in the back of the cave. I mean, it's there. So anyway, so for the growth month of June, know your trauma spots, know where you've got your push buttons, and let's start working on June being like, maybe we'll talk about it being like more of like the release into summer. So we grew in May and we're going to release into the summer of releasing some of this baggage that we have by dealing with it better.
I like it.
I like it too.
Ask some questions.
I know. Ask yourself some questions.
Yep.
All right. So I will see you guys next week and have a great week.